Hello, in this video we will talk about Niccolo Machiavelli. Niccolo Machiavelli was born on 3rd May 1469 in Florence, Italy. In English literature, when we call someone as Machiavellian, we mean that he is cunning, selfish, immoral, who can go to any height to pursue their dream. And sometimes he is anti-Christian too. Shakespeare's Machiavellian heroes include Richard II, Richard III, Iago in Othello, Edmund in King Lear, Claudius in Hamlet, Shylock in Merchant of Venice, and many more. Even Christopher Marlowe in Jew of Malta brought the dead Machiavelli on stage in the prelude to Act I to introduce the wicked character Barabbas. Tamburlaine has also Machiavellian characteristics. So what did Niccolo Machiavelli actually do? Niccolo Machiavelli in his book The Prince gives advice to the king that acquisition and maintenance of power is the real objective of a king, and for that reason he has to be immoral or sinful wherever necessary. The king must rule his kingdom as his personal territory, as his personal property. Machiavelli is giving out such sinful advice to the king, but it is also shocking that Machiavelli worked as a diplomat under a government. When the government was dissolved by monarchy, he was thrown out of the power. So he must be anti-sovereign, anti-monarch. But why is he saying such things in favor of the monarch, in favor of the king in his book? So let's find out. In 1494, Medici family had been removed from power and a republican government had been established. 4 years later, in 1498, Niccolo Machiavelli was appointed as the second chancellor of the Republic of Florence, and he held his position for 14 years. In 1512, the Medici defeated the government and came back to throne. As a result, Machiavelli was imprisoned and then forced to retire. He spent his life in isolation in a farmhouse outside of Florence and devoted his time in writing. The Prince was written in 1513 but published posthumously in 1532. It is said that the text was written by Machiavelli to attain favor of King Lorenzo de' Medici and regain his position in the political affairs. The opening chapter of the text has a dedication to King Lorenzo, where he states out the purpose of his writing the book. He states that the purpose of his writing the book is to explain to the king the ways to run a country in the best manner. Machiavelli had also written discourses on the 10 books of Titus Livy, The Art of War, and some other prose and verse as well. In the course of time, Machiavelli got the favor of Medici family. He was commissioned for writing the history of Florence. But before he could finish other commissioned works, Machiavelli died in 1527. There was a tradition of writing mirror of prince books in medieval and Renaissance times. In these books, the authors used to lay guidelines for the prince to follow while ruling their country. These books often believed that authority is legitimate when it is morally good. Niccolo Machiavelli criticizes this moralistic point of view. He believed that good people have no power by virtue of being good. So there is no relation between moral goodness and power. According to him, the real concern of the ruler is acquisition and maintenance of power. He says that through proper use of power, common mass of a country can be put to obey the ruler and there will be no disturbance in the country. Rules are only obeyed when there is a fear of punishment, a fear of consequence. Authority is something which needs to be enforced. Fear and violence helps to control the subjects better than sympathy and affection. By using the power, the authority must produce an ideology that obedience is unavoidable. According to Machiavelli, those monarchs who prefer power over legitimate authority will only succeed in the long run. Those monarchs who will abide by honest laws will eventually die with his own rules. Machiavelli also gives the concept of virtue. Now, this virtue doesn't mean moral goodness. Virtue refers to the personal qualities that the prince needs to acquire in order to maintain his state and to achieve great things. The sovereign must be capable of varying his or her attitude from good to evil and back to good whenever necessary, whenever the situation demands him to be. Virtue includes the ability to face any unforeseen events in future. Fortuna is another term which refers to unforeseen bad luck or the chance of getting things bad or an accident that causes headache for the king. Machiavelli personifies Fortuna as female. Fortuna arrives with her all-devouring force. The weak and the effeminate will succumb to her forces and they will die. The work of the prince is to hold her back with much greater force. Fortuna is a female and she demands suppression, domination, else one will be consumed. She more often lets herself be overcome by men using such methods than by those who proceed coldly. Virtue should include this ability of the prince, and together with virtue and wisdom, Fortuna shall be dominated. The king must think of his country as his personal property. He uses the Latin term dominium, which places it in the middle between private property and political dominion. So the characteristics of the king, the virtue, becomes important. In his other works, Machiavelli presents quite contrary ideas, and it may seem that the Prince and the other works might have been written by different authors. For example, in Discourses, Machiavelli talks about republic. He says that a minimum constitutional order is necessary so that people live securely, or to use the Latin term, vivere securo. If there is a constitution in a country, then both the ambitions of the ruler and the people are checked through the constitution. The goal of the politics should be the freedom of the community, or vivere libero, created by the active participation of the nobility and the people. Machiavelli is of the opinion that monarchy with a parliament functions better. He draws the example of French government. In France, the parliament checks any oppressive will of the ruler. In this setting, the king cannot become tyrannical. However, in this perfect setting too, it is not possible to achieve liberty. People of the country will always strive for liberty. The prince has to understand the conditions under which the people of the country are asking for liberty. A lot of people ask liberty in order to command others. Now, they can be done away with honors and social recognitions. But for a vast majority of the people, they confuse liberty with security. To mean security, they use the word liberty. The king cannot provide this security, but can only provide an illusion of security. If the laws are drawn and the margins are set, and the king abides by those laws, then the people of the country will gradually start believing that they are living securely. Again, he draws the example of French government where people are living securely because the ruler or the monarch is abiding by the laws of the parliament. But this security is not liberty. A monarchic rule can never be able to provide security to its citizens. According to Machiavelli, liberty to the citizens comes through arms. If there is a foreign attack upon the country, then the country has to depend on other countries to fight for its behalf. On the other hand, if the people are provided with arms and ammunitions, then they can be brought into war. If the king gives importance to security, then it will never give arms to its population, because the king is in fear that the arms will be used against the king. If the king maintains a formal army along with citizen army, then it gives real liberty to the people. Additionally, if the citizens has access to ammunition and arms, the king can never become tyrannical. I think there is a similarity between Hegel and Machiavellian thinking. Hegel talks about thesis, antithesis and synthesis. Machiavelli says that both the people and the nobility with their contrary ideas must engage in governance. In this clash, a constructive governance is born. In discourses, he says that through speech or debate, we can come to the resolution at the time of such a conflict. He gives importance to public speaking. The public may think some new law as oppressive. In that case, a trustworthy orator can be brought and he can elucidate to the people the real objectives of the law and the truth behind it. Machiavelli says that the problems of the common man can be resolved through speech, but a king can never be persuaded with speech. He gives the example that the common man can never be persuaded to accept or to appoint a corrupt man in an important position, but the king in various circumstances under various pressures might accept the corrupt person or might appoint the corrupt person in an important position. Sovereign countries that do not have a republican government do not give importance to speech and ultimately rest on violence. In all his works other than Prince, Machiavelli talks about republic. Machiavelli favors the republican system. In Prince, he talks about the ever-changing nature of the king according to his circumstances. As such radical changes is not possible for a human being, it is said that Machiavelli in a roundabout way promotes republics. Now there are various critical responses upon this. Jean-Jacques Rousseau says that Machiavelli in this text, the Prince, exposes the real nature of the prince and politics to the people. Garrett Mattingly is of the opinion that Machiavelli is a satirist. Machiavelli as a satirist points out the wrongdoings of the prince and his advisors. Machiavelli wrote comedies, so he had a habit of this tone. Mary Dates opines that Machiavelli tried to trap the prince. If the prince follows his example, like arming the people of the country, then Medici kingdom might fall down and the republic would be re-established. Jared Coleman is of the opinion that Machiavelli was trapped between innovation and tradition, between via antiqua and via moderna. The authors before Niccolo Machiavelli had always tried to show that the virtuousness of the king will ultimately help him get a good kingdom or will ultimately help in ruling the kingdom. So this is the tradition. At the same time, Machiavelli's attitude towards the system is much more scientific in nature. He, just like science negates the moral aspect, just like science depends on observation and action, Machiavelli goes in this way. So it is said that Machiavelli's approach is quite scientific in nature as opposed to traditional moralistic views. If you want to join more such philosophic discussions, then you can join my Telegram channel. Alternatively, if you don't want to join, you can subscribe my YouTube channel for more such videos. Thank you.